over the next month. We acknowledge that some of our close partners have and others haven't taken a position to formally recognise Palestine. It's a formal decision that Cabinet will take in September, and frankly it's something that the Minister of Foreign Affairs will articulate when he's at the Leaders' Week in the UN at the end of September.
Winston Peters says that there's strong views within the government over this issue. Who holds those strong views within Cabinet, and are you confident you'll be able to come to a unified position?
Oh, absolutely. But we have. I'm just acknowledging that this is an issue that has been. We've had a long-standing position, since partition in 1947 to recognise both Palestine and Israel, and clearly, our focus has been, as we've said, when, not if, and as a result, for us, we've got to work through this rather, serious issue, and we've got to do it properly. It's a complex issue. There are strong feelings on all sides of this debate. In the public, as you've seen, and it's important that we make the right decision for New Zealand.
Are you confident that all three parties within the coalition will come to a unified position on that?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Can you lay out for us the factors that you will need to consider before making a decision?
No, I'm not going to get ahead of the process. We're taking it very seriously. We appreciate that it's it's an important decision, and it's something that for us to work through in a very serious, proper way, and that's what we're going to do.
What message does it send that New Zealand is out of step with Canada, France, the United Kingdom, and now Australia?
Well, look, I've spoken to President Macron, I've spoken to Prime Minister Starmer, I've spoken to Prime Minister Albanese. We've talked about their respective country positions around that. We're going to form our own position. It's a complex issue and it'll take some time, but again, we've had our first conversation in Cabinet, as you've reported today, and we've got a process that we'll work through. I don't want to get ahead of that process.
Why now, though? Why now?
Sorry?
Why is it being considered now?
Well, as you've seen, a number of partners, some partners have moved their position from the historical one that we've been very aligned with as well. Others haven't, and as a result, it's important for us to, weigh up our position as a government, and that's the work that we'll do over the next few weeks. Sorry.
What are your main concerns with recognising a state of Palestine?
Well, it's just, it's important that it's a complex decision. There are a range of views on all sides of the debate. It's important that we make our own decision as New Zealand. We have an independent foreign policy. It's important that we weigh it up seriously. It's a complex issue, and I think we've got a good process to work our way through that decision. But I just say to you, what we're really fixated on is, we are seeing a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. We are seeing Hamas hold hostages that should be released. We're seeing no evidence of a ceasefire emerging at this point in time. There's good efforts going on from the US. There's good efforts going on from other Arab states as well. We want to encourage that, but the bottom line is that hasn't materialised. And so, what we really need to see is a stop to the suffering that's happening. But equally, as you saw with the statement that the Foreign Minister signed this week with a number of other countries over the weekend, what Israel's doing, we think is wrong. It sort of certainly aggravates the humanitarian situation, and their plans and proposals risk violating international law. And so, it's entirely appropriate that we take the time to actually make sure we weigh up our decision and work that through in a sensible way.
Does it worry you that the United States might look at that in a bad way?
No, we have an independent foreign policy, and we'll make our own decisions that are right for New Zealand and consistent with our values.
Prime Minister, practically, what would formally recognising Palestine look like for New Zealand?
Well, again, I'm not going to get ahead of the process. We've had, I think, a statement from the Minister today post a Cabinet conversation. It was the first opportunity that we've had as a Cabinet in person to come together to have an initial conversation about that. And, obviously it's important that process runs through. But as I just say to you, is that, since partition in 1947, we've strongly supported, a separate Palestine, a separate Israel, living peacefully together. Obviously, different countries have made assessment shifts in recent weeks, as you've seen, and some of our friends have, and partners have, and some of our partners haven't.
Would we consider having an ambassador either based here in Wellington or doing a bit of timeshare?
Getting way too ahead of the process. As I said, we've got a lot to weigh up our position over the next month. We'll go through that process in a very diligent, conscientious way.
Why won't you lay out the conditions for that recognition? Why don't New Zealand just get to know how the government's going to decide?
Well, the government's foreshadowing to you how we are going to go about that process. What we're saying very clearly is that we'll make a formal decision in September. We want the Cabinet will make a decision at that point, and the Minister, when he's at UN Leaders' Week, will communicate our approach on that issue.
Why don't we get to know what the criteria is for it?
Well, we will work that through as a government and as a cabinet. And
Will you then share it once you've figured it out?
absolutely, yes, once we announce a decision.
Prime Minister, will you recognise a state of Palestine while Hamas still has hostages? MPs have suggested it's promoting terrorism. I mean, how are you expected to get agreement at the cabinet table when people are saying things this strong?
Well, you would have seen, well, absolutely, we're not going to recognise the state that has Hamas in it. There is no role for Hamas in any future Palestinian state. I think you've seen that from a number of the leaders that have changed their positions on recognition or accelerated their positions on recognition. So for us, that's an absolute non-starter.
Will New Zealand get to know what the Cabinet's decision is before Mr. Peters goes to New York?
I suspect so. Well, we're going through a process where we're going through Cabinet will have make its own decision, as I said, in the month of September. That will then be communicated at the UN Leaders Forum that week. I imagine around that time New Zealand will know as well.
How does New Zealand recognise a country?
Sorry?
How does New Zealand recognise a state?
Well, it's a complex issue, and so, as you well know, there's a range of thoughts around what actually constitutes statehood, and that's actually why it's a complex issue, because we want to be able to work through those issues and make sure we're making the right decision and our own position on it.
Hamas need to release the hostages before we recognise Palestine?
Well, again, our view very clearly is Hamas started this, October 7th, with 1,200 Jewish folk, innocent civilians killed, hostages that have been held over a long period of time. They need to release the hostages. It's as simple as that. They're a terrorist organisation, and they need to release hostages immediately.
Do that before we recognise Palestine?
Well, there's no role for Hamas in any future Palestinian state, and I think you've heard Arab states articulate that very clearly. You've actually heard the Palestinian Authority articulate that very clearly. You saw us sign a letter in New York over a week ago, which was again saying, we want to see free and fair elections. There'd be a whole bunch of criteria that would be necessary around that, but I'm not going into that conversation because we need to work our own way through the process, and we'll make our own decision about it.
The Prime Minister has outlined some of those criteria, even in his statement. He's spoken of in the past about what they want, what New Zealand would want to see in order to recognise. Some of those things aren't going to happen in the next month. You're not going to have elections in the next month. So are you in a bit of a bind here? How will you recognise if some of those things don't happen?
Well, as you can imagine, this is why I'm saying to you it's a very complex issue, because it's all very well recognising a state, but what comes next? That is the critical question. And so, those are the things that we need to think through and work our way through as we come to a very considered and deliberate decision about our position on it.
It would be a conditional decision.
Again, I'm not going to presuppose the outcome and get ahead of the process.
Did Albanese give you a heads up of their decision or their announcement over?
Over the last week, I've spoken with President Macron. I've spoken with Prime Minister Starmer. I've spoken, obviously, with Anthony on this issue. We talked about it again while we were together over the weekend. You've heard his statement today where he said that yes, he and I spoke about it, and that is the case. And so, I understand the partners' positions for their countries. Obviously, there are variances between Canada, UK, France as to how they've gone about doing it, which I think speaks to some of the complexity and the challenge and actually moving into forward with recognition. You've got there's a different set of everyone's coming at it with slightly different approaches, and that's why it is complex and difficult, and we have to work through our own view on that and weigh up our own position around that. But we will make our own decision based off our own values.
Have you communicated this to Israel?
Sorry?
How have you communicated this to Israel?
Well, again, I'm not aware that we have communicated this to Israel. Right now, we've had a cabinet conversation, which you've seen a statement come out, and I'm answering the questions from that today. Sorry?
Are you expecting to speak to a representative of Israel soon to communicate?
Well, we may well, but I mean, we need to be able to work our way through the process, as you understand, which is that Cabinet will make a decision in the coming weeks that will be communicated when we get to the UN Leaders Week. We need to make a decision that's the one way up our position in New Zealand. It is complex, as I've said. There are debates of doing it, not doing it. There will be debates of people with strong views on either side of the debate. I get all of that, but it's entirely appropriate that we come to inform our own view after a very considered approach.
Who does New Zealand talk to on the Palestinian side about for recognising a state?
I promise. Minister Peters has actually spoken to he's had a number of interactions actually with the Palestinian side, and over a number of years.
Palestinian Authority?
The Palestinian Authority would be obvious people to talk to, and he has talked to in the past.
Can I just ask a question about another matter?
Sure.
Was Winston Peters' behaviour on Friday at the City Rail Link test train refusing to put on a high-vis vest